Mr. Secretary, in exchange with Mr. Mills, you just testified under oath that you never owned a private jet. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record article here from February 15th of 2023 that the John Kerry family private jet was sold shortly after accusations of climate hypocrisy. Mr. Secretary, do you stand by that testimony that you've never owned or
I personally,
your family?
your family? Personally, yes. My wife owned a plane and sold the plane.
You flew on that plane?
Not in a number of years, but I have flown on it, sure.
And this article is not then inaccurate that your family owned a plane, you flew on a plane.
My wife
Mr. Secretary,
my wife owned a plane.
Here's the issue.
Yeah.
This isn't some kind of partisan gotcha. When we are asking Americans to make serious sacrifices as we transition for the common good, and your family and or yourself are flying around on private jets, that smacks of hypocrisy. It actually hurts your cause, Mr. Secretary. But I'll move on. I just want to know from a record standpoint.
Afford me the right, at least, to set the record straight here. I do not fly on a private jet. I do not fly. I fly commercially.
Have you flown on a private jet since you've taken this position?
Just let me finish. I have flown 5 times in the last 2.5 years on Millair, which you also fly on,
sure.
or some of you who travel fly on, 5 times. Otherwise, all of my trips are commercial airlines.
Have you flown on a private jet in a personal or official capacity since you've taken this position?
Possibly once. I just don't. I'm trying to think of
I think you need to take the broader point of how this appears to the American people as we're asking them to take that.
Let me tell you why.
We're
not asking Americans. We're not asking Americans not to fly. You're trying to create an unequal thing. We're not saying
we're asking
don't
you
fly.
to lead by example, Mr. Secretary. That's what we're at.
Which is why I fly commercially.
By example.
Which is why I fly.
In that vein, does your office or the State Department keep a record of your official travel and scheduled meetings?
Of course.
Does that include the individuals you're scheduled to meet with?
Can
you provide those records to Congress? Will you provide those records to Congress?
Of who I've met with?
Your official travel. Your official travel, taxpayer funded, while in this position.
Sure, happy to do so.
Thank you. I appreciate that commitment. Switching topics here to some of the other diplomacy you've conducted. In a 2018 interview, you admitted to speaking with Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif, quote, 3 or 4 times from the start of the previous administration. How many times did you speak with the foreign minister, the Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif, during the last administration? And I'll enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, that 3 or 4 times. So let's take that at face value. Did you communicate with him using Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, any other?
I don't recall how I communicated with him. I met him formally in the course of international, specifically I think it was at UNGA in New York. I saw him in Munich at the Munich Security Conference, which he was invited to.
According to leaked audio provided by the New York Times, Zarif said you told him that Israel attacked Iranian assets in Syria at least, quote, at least 200 times, and Zarif was surprised you would reveal such sensitive information. Now, that was according to leaked audio. Now, under oath, do you stand by your previous denial that ever happened?
I absolutely stand by. On the day that report came out, we made it crystal clear in a release that we put out that never took place. It was at a time when there was public discussion of those attacks. It was in public circulation. Now, I don't know what he's confusing or what he did, but I can tell you that I never had that conversation, and I can tell you that in 5 years running one of the largest prosecutor's offices in America, in 2 years as lieutenant governor, in 28 years in the Senate, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, as a
This is why I'm going. I only have a few seconds left.
Nobody ever questioned.
This is why I'm raising that issue. would you find it appropriate if a former Trump administration official traveled around and talked to the same officials you are and said, you don't have to abide by these agreements, hold fast till 2024, a new regime or a new administration may be coming in, and therefore undermining current administration diplomacy? Would you find that appropriate?
I'm not going to speak to any hypotheticals, but I can tell you I never engaged in that.
Shadow diplomacy undermines American goals.
Shadow diplomacy, depending on what involved. Shadow diplomacy has also saved us from a war. If you look at 1963 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was behind the scenes, back
Mr.
channel
Secretary, I would posture that your shadow diplomacy now has us on the verge
I
of
wasn't
Iran
conducting
having
shadow
a nuclear
diplomacy.
weapon.
I was at a security
That
conference.
is now exploding as they race towards full enrichment from 20% to 60%, on the verge of having a nuclear weapon and a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
And the reason that has happened is that Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement.
Undermine other administrations.
The reason that happened, my friend, is because Donald Trump pulled out of that agreement. There was no way they could have had a nuclear weapon under the agreement that existed. And even in Israel, the security establishment of Israel believed that agreement had done the job. President Trump just pulled out.
Chair now
Gave it away.
recognizes Mr. Schneider.